We are still digesting all of the varied results from last week's elections, and some of them are really unfortunate, even if they're not about particular politicians being elected or not. In fact, in New York, which is supposed to be one of the most progressive states, voters turned down multiple ballot initiatives that would have made it easier to vote in a variety of ways. One of the proposals would have paved the way for lawmakers to get rid of a longstanding state policy that requires voters to give an excuse if they want to vote by mail. 34 states and the District of Columbia allow anyone to vote by mail for any reason, so New York is less progressive in a voting sense than the vast majority of states. Another would have allowed people to register to vote on election day. And so why did these sorts of common sense changes that are already law in a number of other states not get passed? Well, there are some activists in New York that believe they know why. Sarah Goff of Common Cause says there was an assumption that of course it'll pass because it's New York. And unfortunately, we woke up Wednesday morning and saw that that was definitely not true. Republicans and conservatives treated these ballot initiatives like essential threats and moved accordingly. And we just did not see that from the institutional supporters that we would have liked to. In fact, New York's Conservative Party spent $3 million opposing those ballot initiatives. Republicans traveled across the state as part of a Just Say No campaign, echoing national Republicans. They said that they needed to protect against voter fraud, even though it doesn't exist. And the state Democratic Party spent no money on the 3 ballot initiatives that would have expanded voting access, would have made this democratic state in a democratic country more of a democracy. Nina, this is what happens when only one side actually has any skin in the game.
Outrageous. And while Democrats are playing checkers, Republicans are playing chess. And the fact that the state party of New York did not invest the requisite money into giving these initiatives a fighting chance of passing. You know why they didn't? Because they were too busy comparing the candidacy of India Walton running for mayor in Buffalo to that of David Duke. That's why the hell they didn't do it. And we expand and protect access to the ballot box, John, is not that hard. Expand and protect. And Democrats are failing. They're failing on the state level of government, particularly in states where Republicans control everything, because we're not making the requisite investment in state legislatures to run candidates to stand up. So we're just getting ran over there. And then on the federal level, look at here, look at here. We got organizations, particularly Black organizations, because of the unique history of Blacks in this country, but voting rights should matter to everybody. But Black folks uniquely begging this administration and a democratically controlled Congress to get rid of the filibuster, pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and the For the People Act, which both did pass the House of Representatives. Kudos to them, but they not going anywhere in the United States Senate because of the filibuster. So I should not be surprised. We should not be surprised that in the great state of New York, the Democrats did not lift one finger, didn't do anything to try to make sure that those measures pass. What are we living in? Why would you not have no fault absentee voting in the 21st century? Why don't we just make voting election day a holiday in the United States of America while we at it? John, I am so upset about this because I ran for Secretary of State in my state in 2014, trying to push back a recalcitrant Republican whose reward for suppressing the vote, for using his power to suppress the vote, is to be lieutenant governor right now. We better wake up and get a clue. I'm just incensed, 100%. As you know.
Yeah, they didn't do anything. They were complacent or they don't care. They were Senate Dems asked the party to do something about it. They didn't do anything.
Yeah,
they just
didn't do it.
It could have easily passed. And and this ties back to what I was talking about earlier. Like, these are the people that are supposed to save us from this new Republican Party. They're supposed to protect us. We're in trouble.
Yeah. We're in trouble.
What's going to happen? Like, you have states around the country that are suppressing the vote. And these are new levels of suppression in states that already had been doing this for decades. They're still finding new ways to make it more difficult to vote. And the Dems could solve it. They just choose not to. They like the tradition of the filibuster.
No, they like, since Shelby v. Holder, John, let's remind the people who are joining us right now, Shelby v. Holder. And you know what that was? A backlash against the election of the first Black president. Let's continue to have this truth talk here. And Republicans playing for the long game again, and Democrats playing checkers. You cannot win the presidency and the Congress and then meanwhile back in states across this country, leave state houses vulnerable, governor's mansions vulnerable to this kind of foolishness, that then when you're trying to get the very voters that you need to come out to vote, they are hindered to their access. And I don't mean for everybody. I don't care if they vote Republican or not. I'm talking about expanding and protecting access to the ballot box. And Republicans continue to win the argument on this. Voter, they know that the likelihood of people walking into voting places trying to imitate somebody else is slim to none. There are already laws on the books for people that will commit voter fraud. Stop playing. They committing voter fraud. Voter depression and suppression is a fraud.
Yeah, go talk to Glenn Youngkin's son, who tried to vote twice despite not being old enough to vote once. Like the problem is coming from inside of your house.
Yes.
And I don't expect the Republicans do not need to be convinced to embrace democracy. That's not going to happen. They know they can't win in a true democracy. That's why they're choking it to death. So I'm not surprised by that. I'll report on it or whatever. I'll remind you that the Republicans are doing all of this, but they're not the variable that matters. It's the Democrats. That's why, while the Democrats might philosophically, supposedly agree with us a little bit, their betrayal of these values is 100 times worse, because it's the factor that is actually the difference between us having these bills and not. We're never going to convince the Republicans, but we should hope that we should be able to convince the Democrats, especially in a state as solidly blue as New York.
Here it is.
But we can't. Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.